Good Friday morning to you. As I think about the end of the week, I was reflecting on a time when I worked for hospice. It was several years ago. I was a hospice chaplain and I covered five counties in northern Wisconsin. So I ended up driving a lot. And it was pretty great because I had this diesel Volkswagen Bug. And so I would just drive all over the place. Now, these were rural communities, and as it is, you don't always have great radio reception. And my Bug was old enough that it didn't have all of the wonderful technology of Bluetooth and those things, but it did have a CD player. And so I would get books on tape, or in my case, CD, and play them in my car as I drove around the countryside from home to home, sitting with people, talking with families, comforting and providing support. One of my favorite books during this time that I listened to on my book by CD was called The Alchemist. It's by Paulo Coelho, and I don't think I'm pronouncing his name correctly. It was written in the late 80s, and one of the things I loved about the book on CD is that Jeremy Irons narrates it. So you have this wonderful, velvety, accented voice to tell you the story. Now, The Alchemist is not a Christian book. In fact, it's a fantasy about desert winds and spirits that move. But for me, as I was listening, I couldn't separate my Christian views and understanding from what I was listening to. And so for me, it became an incredible imagery of how God's Spirit blows and pushes us in a direction that we may not normally have gone. I love this book. It's actually one that I've offered to people to borrow from me. I have a hard copy now, and it's one that I suggest when you're in a place of wonder and even a little wander. The Alchemist reminds us that God's Spirit is not something that we can see necessarily. We only see the actions of His Spirit. But when the wind blows, we know from where it comes. I was thinking about the power of meditating on how God is at work. You know, sometimes we think about meditation and we get this idea that we're, sitting in a certain position with our legs crossed and our eyes closed and we're chanting, right? Meditation is far more intense than that. In fact, the Hebrew Bible talks about meditation in a way that reminds us that it is not what it seems. The Hebrew word for meditate is hagah. It means to meditate, but it actually is often translated to growl, to snarl, to feast. In Isaiah, the lions are meditating over God's enemies, and that is exactly the translation. They are ready to consume and savor and crunch and do all the things that lions do. C.S. Lewis was known for seeing God through the eyes of lions. If you've ever read any of the Chronicles of Narnia books, the ones that come before and after, the lion is the representation for God. And there's a great interaction in the Chronicles of Narnia where the beavers are talking to Lucy. And Lucy realizes that the person that the beavers are talking about, the good being, is a lion. And she says, "He's a lion. Is he friendly? Is he safe?" And the beavers say, "No, he's not safe. He's a lion. But he's good." See, that's the reality with God. He's not always safe. I mean, nothing that we do when we follow God is safe from the perspective of what we might choose to do. It's not cautious, but it's always good. As I was thinking about this idea of meditating, especially after a very long week, where things have just been so crazy, right? I mean, I don't know if there's anyone in this world, and if that's you, give me a call because I'd love to talk about it with you. But if there's anyone in this world who just feels good about everything that has happened, both past and present, but we do have hope for the future. There are two psalms that this word meditate falls in, and I want to read just a couple passages from each of them. Psalm 1 is the blessings. It's in the introduction as David writes his psalms to the Lord. It's the introduction of all that he puts his faith and trust. And if you've read through the entirety of the Psalms, you know that that there's a lot of things being worked out throughout the Psalms. How we respond to God, how we follow God, how we mourn with God, and how we rage against what God allows. Psalm 1 verses 1 and 2 says this: "Blessed is the one who does not walk in step with the wicked, or stand in the way that sinners take, or sit in the company of mockers, but who delight in the law of the Lord, and who meditate on his law day and night." Now remember the translation: meditate, to growl, snarl, feast. Those who delight in the law of the Lord and feast on it day and night. Psalm 77 is another similarity. It says in verses 11 through 13, "I will remember the deeds of the Lord. Yes, I will remember your miracles of long ago. I will consider all of your works and meditate on your mighty deeds. Your ways, God, are holy. What God is as great as our God? I will feast on your mighty deeds. I will feast on the wonders." These are the ways that we are sustained in good times and bad, to feast on all that God has given to us and does for us and does among us and does because of who he is for us. Chad Bird is a theologian in the Lutheran Church, and he's a Hebrew scholar, and he writes this about Haggah. "Christian meditation is not about closing your eyes and disappearing into yourself, but focusing your eyes on the Bible and disappearing into Christ. Consume God's word like a lion that consumes its prey." Just think about that as you end your week. What has consumed your focus? What has consumed your attention? Where have you grounded yourself in? Is it joy? Is it anxiety? Is it fear? Is it wonder? Is it God's word? Consume Christ. Meditate on Christ. Meditate in God's word so you are consumed by Christ. It's a fantastic thought, and it's really the practice that we are called to practice as we live as Christians. We do not always see the Spirit, but we know from which way the wind blows. That's the beauty of what it means to be a people of faith. We may not always know the direction it's pushing us, but we know that from where it comes is good. Have a great end of your week.